The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to, as Treasurer Falwell, like to welcome everyone to the May 2nd North Carolina Local Government Commission for calling this meeting to order. As we call the meeting to order, we will ask Cindy Aiken to call the roll and go over a few housekeeping items, followed by us asking you to stand and joining our Pledge of Allegiance. Secretary Marshall will lead us in the salute to North Carolina flag, and then we'll move into our agenda.
Okay, thank you. This is Cindy Aiken, Assistant General Counsel. Let's see, we'll go ahead and call the roll. Secretary Marshall is here in the room. Secretary Penny.
Here.
Also here in the room. Mr. Burns.
Here.
Participating online, Mr. Butler.
Here.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Harvey. Yes. Thank you. Councilwoman Huffman.
Here.
Online, Mr. Philbeck.
Here.
Treasurer.
Here.
In the room, and Auditor Wood is not here yet. Housekeeping items. Everyone who will be speaking today, please identify yourself when you're speaking. Members, same thing. When you're making motions and seconds, we'll get you to identify yourself, please. All votes will be taken by roll call, and without objection, motions and seconds will be considered as yes votes unless a member indicates otherwise during the voting. These meeting proceedings, other than any closed session, if any, are being recorded and will be made available to the public pursuant to the Department of State Treasurer's recording public meetings policy. If you are participating virtually, please mute yourself when you are not speaking. If we should lose power or have an AV connection loss, the meeting will continue, and be aware that all audio and video may continue to be broadcast. The agenda for today's meeting is posted on the department's website, www.nctreasurer.com. If we have any at the local government commission page. If there are changes to the agenda, we will announce that during the meeting. And everything except for the Auditor Wood is checked off.
Thank you very much. If you'll now stand and join in for our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I salute the flag of North Carolina and pledge to the Old North State love, loyalty, and faith.
Mr. Chairman, forgot one thing. Forgot to just mention for purposes of the record, staff here in attendance. Sharon Edmondson, Secretary of the LGC. Jennifer Wimmer is in the room, also Director of Debt Management. Debbie Tomaso, our Director of Policy, Tech, and Operations. Again, Cindy Aiken and our staff, Joa Bidley, operating the webinar. And Auditor Wood has just arrived for those of you online. So we have a full house today. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you all for joining us. Mr. Butler, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Well, one of the contingent from the Wilmington crowd wanted to know if you were wearing makeup this morning because you look so tanned. I won't tell you which gentleman said that.
Well, I may need to wear sunshades because it's so bright down there in Wilmington.
Thank you all. Now for our conflict statement, members, please take a moment to, you've had a moment to review the agenda. Does anyone present have an actual conflict, potential or appearance of conflict of interest regarding any matters that are before us today? Hearing none, should a conflict arise, please inform the chair of that conflict as we move forward. For our guests, we've already mentioned the snacks and water that's offered on the table, so be sure to avail yourselves of that. I'll now entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes of April 4th.
So moved.
State Auditor Beth Wood.
Second. Secretary Marshall, thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Approving April 4th minutes, Secretary Penny.
Here, aye.
Thank you. Mr. Burns.
Aye.
Thanks. Mr. Butler.
Here,
I'll take that as an approval of the minutes. Ms. Harvey.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hoffman.
Aye.
Mr. Philbeck.
aye.
Treasurer.
Aye.
Thank you.
The meeting minutes of April 4th have been approved. I'd like to draw everyone's attention to exhibit attachment A, which is our OPEB report, which is part of our structure here to notify all applicants that are coming before us, local governments of all types, their unfunded health care and pension liabilities. Yesterday, I was in the City Hall of Winston-Salem at 6:04, where I was able to brag on Winston-Salem for the fundedness of their actual OPEB liability. Their OPEB fund is 93% funded. 93% funded. When I first became the state treasurer, the big state health plan was only 2% funded. Winston-Salem is 93% funded. And it's the credit to Lawrence Coakley, who sits on the Investment Advisory Committee Board. He was the chief financial officer there 37 years ago. They started putting money toward their unfunded liability. They are definitely the gold standard for sticking with that discipline. So this exhibit is in your attachments, and I can tell you that after just getting off of calls last week with Fitch, Standard & Poor's, and Moody's, this issue about unfunded liabilities is both on the pension and healthcare side are becoming more important to them. With that, I'll now turn the meeting over to Jennifer and Sharon to discuss attachment B as well as an FPIC unit, which is the town of Eden.
This is Jennifer. So the city of Eden is coming to us for a state revolving loan for two contracts dealing with a pump station and linear feet of gravity sewer. These construction contracts have been bid, and the amount needed and requested from DEQ is $14,672,225. Like I said, these projects have been bid, so the amount is known, and I will turn it over to Sharon for their FPIC.
Thank you, Jennifer. The City of Eden did have two items that popped up as financial performance indicators of concern at FPIC. The first is the general fund that they use fund balance for some operating expenditures. And the second was that in the water sewer fund, their operating net income, excluding depreciation, but adding back in principal and interest payments, was negative of almost $1.3 million. On the general fund, the city responded that they had used their some of their fund balance to pay off debt, and that they understood that was going to have a negative impact on their fund balance available for the year. At June 30th, 2022, their percentage of fund balance available stood at 66%, which even after they used it to pay off the debt is well above their group average, and actually an increase from the prior year. So no real concerns there. On the water sewer side, they did have the negative operating income. They have raised rates as of July 1st, 2022. That rate increase is expected to increase revenues by almost $544,000. They also paid off some debt with their money. And between those two items alone, that accounted for just over $1 million of the cash decrease. They expect their expenses to be a little bit lower this year, and that should take care of the rest of it. We are recommending, the city's response was acceptable, and we are recommending approval. We have on the phone Tammy McMichael, the Director of Finance and Personnel, and Anita Robertson, their project manager and funding expert from WK Dixon. If anyone has questions?
Thank you, Town of Eden, for joining us. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, sir, we can. Yes.
I'm sure you were able to hear Jennifer and Sharon's report. Do you have anything you'd like to add to what they've said?
No, sir, I believe Sharon actually clearly discovered and explained exactly what we included in our response for those indicators.
Thank you. Just a offline question. What's the status of the Miller Coors plant? What's going on in that property? I'm just curious from an economic development standpoint.
Right. Purina has purchased that property, and we're expecting them to go actually open up for business hopefully within the next year. But they've been doing a lot of expansions and renovations to the building itself. But we're excited to have Purina in Eden.
Good. Thank you. Staff, board, you've heard the staff's recommendation to approve this for the Town of Eden. You've heard the remedies that the Town of Eden is putting forth to fix the problems that led them to be on the FPIC unit to start with. Do I hear a motion to approve? Move approval. Thank you. Further discussion?
So moved, Nancy Hoffman.
Thank you, Ms. Hall.
Council. Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure. She is.
Mayor Pro Tem Hoffman, thank you. Motion second being made. Any further discussion regarding staff's recommendation? Thank you. Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Okay, that was motion Penny and second Hoffman. Auditor Wood? Aye. Secretary Marshall? Aye. Mr. Burns?
Aye.
Butler?
Aye.
Ms. Harvey?
Aye.
Hilda?
Aye.
Treasurer?
Aye. Thank you, Eden, and good luck to you to get off our list.
Thank you.
Next, item B is I'll turn it over to Jennifer again for attachment C to go through our consent agenda, which will cover us from Beach Mountain through the Wilmington Housing Authority.
This is Jennifer again. I would like to make one correction and a second additional information. The Beach Mountain item needs to be Truist Bank at that rate, not T. And the Moore County interim financing got their bank and rate after the printing. So it is First Bank at 4.57 with a maturity of June 11, 2024, when the USDA will take that out. Otherwise, if anyone has any questions regarding anything on the consent agenda, I would be happy to take them. But staff is recommending the consent agenda.
Before we go to questions, does anyone wish to have anything removed from the consent agenda? Since we had started. Really? You know,
Contagious.
get to the, I didn't have it till I had it. All right. Hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda that starts at Beach Mountain and goes through the Wilmington Housing Authority?
So
So
moved.
moved.
Second, Mr. Burns. Second for Mr. Burns. Any further discussion? Before we vote on this, I want to bring to the LGC Board's attention some things that are happening federally regarding housing and loans and things of that nature. We all have more to do than to focus on things in Washington, but I think that it's important to realize that there's an attempt to to revamp how some of the, a better way of describing it, the mortgage insurance thing is working so that people with good credit scores will pay a surcharge into the system. And there's a lot of talk and controversy about that. And because Wilmington Housing Authority is on our agenda today, I just think that whether it's anything that we can do to work collectively to give people the best possible incentive and the best possible opportunity to actually own their own home is important. And so I think you could catch the national news about what's going on about some of these things that are happening at the federal level regarding housing and loans and underwriting. So we have a motion, a second on the table. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Okay, consent agenda with 2 corrections or additions as Jennifer stated, for one for Beach Mountain and one for Moore County. Motion Wood, second Burns. Secretary Marshall? Aye. Penny?
Aye.
Mr. Butler?
Treasurer, are we voting on the entire consent agenda now or just on Beach Mountain?
The entire consent agenda, which starts at Beach Mountain and all the way through Wilmington Housing Authority.
Yeah, I have a question or an observation on the Wilmington Housing Authority.
Yes.
Under acquisition, we're looking at $8 million. And then down under, there's a second line item, acquisition and financing cost of $3,445,691. Why have we got 2 acquisition line items?
Give us just a moment to get that, everybody to get that part of their agenda.
Last page.
This is under, the Cape Fear Hotel Apartments.
If it's just financing cost that was brought up. Just the acquisitions, the 8 million.
Okay, the financing cost, going back to Mr. Butler's question, $3 million?
And again, this is not a conduit for the developer to finance these facilities for low-income citizens.
Okay. Give us a minute, Mr. Butler. On the face of it, that just Mr. Butler, just repeat your concern, please. All right, and the answer.
It's just financing cost. There's acquisition at the top and then the financing cost. Say acquisition again.
Mr. Butler, were you able to hear that response?
I did not understand it.
Mr. Butler, this is Jennifer Wemmer. The number 1 use is the acquisition, and number 4 should only be the financing cost. Acquisition should not be included in that line item.
So that word should not have been on item 4. The word
Correct.
acquisition.
Correct.
Thank you.
Going to Mr. Butler's question, does that seem completely out of line as far as the percentage of the financing cost versus the size of the loan?
Not necessarily, because that takes into account all the preliminary appraisals and everything like that, because of the way that we group the uses of the funds together. The actual uses, there's probably about 20 different uses if we put them out by line item. So we group them together because that would count as a soft cost in financing.
Am I correct to just back the envelope estimate this is over 20%?
That's what was presented.
I've never heard of something that high. Any staff want to chime in on that?
According to Jennifer, it depends on what's in it. Correct. They're grouping quite a few things. It's not all financing costs.
Yes.
Essentially all soft.
Correct. It is all soft cost.
Can we probably dig into that a little bit more as
Absolutely.
we go forward, because it kind of jumps off the page. Mr. Butler, I asked, in case you couldn't hear, I asked the question of why the financing costs seem to be such a big percentage of the loan.
That seems like a fair question to me. I also wonder why there's only one 2-room apartment in there, 2-bedroom apartment in the whole project.
What difference does it make?
Answers that.
That was just the way the market study was done and what they can accommodate in this facility.
It wouldn't be fair to ask the people from Wilmington about this, but
Well, we take a stab at it.
you're welcome to.
Seriously? Unfinished?
The only thing I can say is that it's an old hotel that they've converted.
Mayor, just stand up.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm very familiar with the location. I see it with,
I think, Paul, that it was just an old hotel. Most of the units in there are 1-bedroom units. And I think the market study that they had conducted
And it is for senior
for
housing.
senior housing. Most of the people who live there.
Mr. Butler, were you inquiring on a personal level about the 2-bedroom unit?
well, depends on how the banks keep doing.
If you are, we'll probably have to excuse you from voting. All right. We have a motion, a second on the floor. Any further discussion regarding anything on the consent agenda? Okay. If not, the clerk will call the roll.
All right. Is there anyone who's already voted who wants to change their vote? Otherwise, please do
We've already voted.
Well, now you started, we're halfway through. Butler. All right. So consent agenda with those changes noted by Jennifer. Mr. Butler, your turn to vote. Is that it? Ms. Harvey?
Aye.
Thank you. Hoffman?
Aye.
Mr. Philbeck?
Aye.
Treasurer Falwell?
Aye.
All right, thank you.
Okay, now we're on item 8. Turn it over to Sharon for attachment D, unit updates regarding and votes we'll need for Kingstown and Spring Lake.
Thank you, Treasurer. I am speaking from attachment D. These are the updates on units that the LGC is currently managing finances for. And we do have budget amendments for Robertsonville and Spring Lake. I'm sorry, not Robertsonville. It should be Kingstown. That's an error there. So it'll be Kingstown and Spring Lake budget amendments. Do we want to vote those separately or all together?
Without objection, we'll just vote them all together. Hearing no objection.
All right,
Mr. Philbeck, would you want to split out Kingstown, or do you mind voting them all together?
I'm fine with all together.
Thank you.
all right, I won't spend the time to go through the updates only. They're fairly self-explanatory. We continue to struggle with Eureka. And Cliffside, although things are going fairly well at Cliffside at the moment, Robertsonville is moving right along, making good progress there. Kingstown, again, making good progress, and we do have a budget amendment for them. For 2 items. The first one is to recognize grant proceeds of a little over $5,100 and to appropriate $5,300 of fund balance out of the general fund to put down a concrete pad at Kingstown Park. The second amendment for Kingstown is to recognize a $20,000 BUR emergency operating grant for the sewer fund. That's just to help us cover the cost of operations. Any questions about either one of those amendments?
This is Mike Philbeck. I just want to ask a question. Is Kingstown having any more success collecting more of the sewer money that they were not collecting when this all started?
Yes, sir, I believe they are. I couldn't give you an exact percentage right now. But they have increased their collection efforts tremendously.
Okay, thank you. That's good to hear.
Other questions? Sharon?
All right, moving on to Spring Lake. The first item here is really just a summary of the different amendments that you have to vote on here. Most of these amendments deal with allocating the town's ARPA money. If this is not all of their ARPA funds, so we will probably be coming back at some later date to amend the budget for the rest of the ARPA money. But on these first 2 pages is just a list of the items that they are using the ARPA money for. They did give a one-time bonus to all employees, and then they're using a lot of it to buy capital items that they need or equipment that they need. All right, bank recs are current through the end of March in Spring Lake, and we're working to get the June 30, 2022 audit completed. An update on this, the town is recruiting for a permanent town manager. We did have a setback at a candidate in mind. That person removed themselves from consideration, so we'll have to kind of regroup on that one. They did what? We had a candidate and made it all the way through to the contract negotiations.
We were at the altar.
Yeah, he withdrew his application, so don't know what happened there. Okay, on page D10, this is the amendment to allocate the ARPA dollars to the specific funds. We are using the revenue replacement model for this, which allows them to spend up to $10 million in revenue replacement, which means they don't have to do as much tracking and record keeping as otherwise would be required for this money. Since they got $3.8 million, they're well under the $10 million limit. So that this is the allocation across the various funds. Starting on D11, this is how they're going to spend that money within each fund. D11 is the general fund. D12 is the water sewer fund. D13 is the stormwater fund. D14 is the sanitation fund. And D15 is the fleet maintenance internal service fund.
I have a question.
Secretary Marshall.
Since we've been in the operations part for this town, has the city council, did they put together, or was it the town administrators put together all of the expenditure plans? Has the city council been involved in this in any way?
Yes, very much so.
Other questions? Let me say for the record that when I said we were at the altar, person they were interviewing was unanimously approved. Thumbs up by their board. I believe our local government commission was very confident in the direction they were going with this candidate. I also had an opportunity to speak with this candidate, company of the mayor, by Zoom, and I'm really disappointed and surprised that that this didn't all come together. So I think it's important for the LGC to know that this was one of the few times in the Spring Lake history in the last couple of years where our staff, myself, as well as the city council, were all on the same page. Is that accurate?
Mr. Treasurer,
Yes.
Paul Butler, I got a couple of questions or observations about Spring Lake. First, have we recovered or found the number of law enforcement vehicles that have been missing?
Yes, sir. It was mostly paperwork issues.
Right. Second, has the town hired an attorney yet?
Yes, they hired an attorney last fall, I believe, yeah.
What's his name?
Michael Porter.
All right. In reference to the regionalization merger feasibility study, am I reading this right, that McGill Engineering is going to be the one guiding this study?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And Sharon, do you sense, are they moving towards working with PwC in Bedville, or are they moving towards working with Dunn and some of the other communities?
I have David Irwin here. So David, correct me if I'm wrong. I think the purpose of the study is to figure out which one of those options would be better for the city.
David, come on.
Yeah, well, if all of y'all recall, I have stated on several times that I think one of the first things that ought to be looked at is who is the board going to be on the regionalization study, and can they work together? That is just a suggestion I've made several times in the past. And the 400,000 for this study, was that a direct appropriation from the General Assembly?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Does that, before we call on David, Mr. Butler, does that 400,000 seem excessive for a study?
Not for an MRF study, no.
There's two studies.
It represents,
It's asset inventory and the feasibility studies.
all right, I got it.
And you,
You want to talk about the study just a little bit?
talk about the study a little bit,
It's
and then while you're at it, explain who's actually running the town, since we have been now months without a town manager, and how much time are we physically spending in Spring Lake these days as you go through that? Identify yourself.
David Irwin, staff on LGC, currently the appointed finance officer for Spring Lake. We spend most of every Thursday in Spring Lake signing checks and talking with staff and just checking on things. We have some contractors that are working full-time to carry on current operations and clean up some of the books from the past. And they're very thorough and very good. Sharon, I think you might want to note that in part of that budget amendment, we're also alleviating the interfund debt that the general fund owed the.
I haven't gotten to that one yet.
Okay. Currently, the interim manager is the fire chief. He was appointed in October, and he runs a tight ship. He's made a lot of improvements in terms of the work ethic. The citizens have noted that the town is cleaner, it's better kept, employees, because his words are, if you're at work, you're going to be working. So they're changing their culture internally. And the board is very supportive and interactive, and they participate in lots of the decisions, at the proper level.
This interim town manager's first name is
Jason.
Jason. And you've been observing him now for 6 months?
Yes.
And since you see this person once a week and not every day, and we all know there's a difference when you see somebody every day versus once every week or once every month, how would you gauge? You've already described how you feel about what he does. How are you gauging when you see him as far as his enthusiasm and more cooperation among department heads? And is he more enthusiastic about what he's doing, or is it wearing him down?
I think he's enthusiastic.
I told him he really needs to pace himself. He's more of the boots on the ground kind of logistics guy. And one of the plans or the hopes with this new manager was that Jason was going to kind of get to mentor under him because he's in about, I guess, 3 or 4 years, he'll finish out his time in the fire department. And he would like to think about moving into management. He's actually taken some of the management courses, the ICMA. And he's very enthusiastic about what he's doing.
So bear with me, board, if you would, for a moment. We're not going to have an HR discussion here on behalf of Spring Lake, but is there someone with his qualifications who you're not losing sleep over, given the agreement they signed with us regarding who they need as a city manager? Is that all G Hall or does it not G Hall?
I mean, is the town being run appropriately based on the?
Could a person with his qualifications and a little bit of experience under his belt, is based on our agreement with them, could he even apply for this position?
My opinion is yes, he could.
He could. Okay. Under their agreement with us. All right. Somebody else had something. Somebody else had something. I interrupted.
Another question? I'll move on then to the next amendment, this is one David was referring to. This is on page D16. Between 2014 and 2018, the water sewer fund transferred over $1.8 million to the general fund, presumably to cover shared costs, but they didn't have any documentation for the services. So we went back and analyzed those services during that time frame, and the actual services provided were worth a little over $1.3 million. That left $558,000 that the fund owed back to the water sewer fund. And so this amendment is paying that back to the water sewer fund and just squaring that up and evening everything out for them. It's also appropriating $100,000 for some lighting on Bragg Boulevard.
So if you transfer that back to the water and sewer fund, what type of certainty and stability does it bring to citizens about water and sewer rates not having to go up, or it doesn't change that at all?
Well, the majority of the money was legitimate cost allocations. They just weren't properly documented. So that part wouldn't affect rates at all. The 500 and something thousand was accumulated over 4 or 5 years' time. So I would think that would have a material impact on rates. But they are no longer making that transfer. So it should not affect their rate studies going forward.
Okay, any other questions?
I have one more minute.
Go ahead.
On D17, this is a closeout of an old capital project fund that had been left on the books. Just fixing the budget on it where it had been overspent. Yeah. Cleaning all that up so we can take that fund off the books.
Okay. I'll now entertain a motion to approve staff's recommendations regarding Kingstown and Spring Lake.
Marshall, move approval.
Thank you. Second.
I'll second
Hardwood.
Bruce.
Alder Woods gives a second. Thank you, though. Mr. Burns, any further questions? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Just for everyone listening, to keep it straight, there's 1 budget ordinance amendment for Kingstown and 8 budget ordinance amendments for the town of Spring Lake. Marshall Wood. Secretary Penny.
Aye.
Mr. Burns.
Aye.
Butler.
Aye.
Okay. Ms. Harvey.
Aye.
Councilwoman Hoffman,
Aye.
Mr. Philbeck,
Aye.
and Treasurer.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Treasurer,
Yes, ma'am.
I have a concluding inquiry. All of these 8 different transfers, has that all of that background work and everything been done by Mr. Urban and his group, or is there somebody from Spring Lake working side by side, or several somebodies to learn from this process?
The contractor that the town hired has been working with us to develop all these numbers and create all these amendments. There really isn't anybody in the Spring Lake Finance Office right now. We have been trying to hire a finance officer, not successfully, obviously. But we also have not been very aggressive in recruiting, hoping that we would get a town manager and that person could hire their own finance officer. We may have to revisit that decision soon.
Follow up, Mrs. Marshall.
No, we've been with this for so long, and, we would hope that things would be taking the right steps so that the authority could be returned to them and have confidence that, that we get into the same problem in the future, but we're not there.
All right, that's been approved, correct? Sort of not under your breath, but you talked about Robersonville, giving us a baseball analogy in the past about what inning we're in as far as possibility of turning the keys back over to that city. And thoughts.
I think we're still in the 9th inning, if that's where we were before.
Rain delay.
Rain delay.
Rain delay.
And a couple of hiccups, but we're still making progress.
It's rain delay. Martin Truex normally wins, so maybe we need him down there. With that, we'll turn it back over to Sharon and Debbie for some unit updates.
We're on the Wilmington presentation, Mr. Treasurer.
Oh, good. You're exactly right. I'm exactly wrong. Thank you. We're now ready for our Wilmington presentation, and you're all welcome to come up, or how many of you just scoot some chairs up if you'd like to. Mayor, you can sit in the middle there. If anybody from the audience is called on, if you'll just please stand and identify yourself. I want to start off by saying we're glad to see you, number one. Number two, we ask good questions, and sometimes they seem like they're tough questions. But that's, we have a job to do, we have a job to do. Right. Some of the questions that we ask are things that have come to us through our public email. We have folks listening in, so everything we say is on the record, everything you say is on the record. And we're going to get started, and Mayor, you have the floor, and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Falwell. We appreciate you allowing us to make our presentation this afternoon. Appreciate all the work that you folks do for the great state of North Carolina, and coming before you many times for issues. We've had a very good relationship with this department. Just want to say thank you.
Mr. Treasurer, may I ask the gentleman to speak up a little bit, or direct the mic closer to his mouth? It's hard to hear. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Bill Sappho, and I'm now the mayor of the city of Wilmington. I've been the mayor of the city of Wilmington since July of 2006. I was elected to the city council in 2003. Along with me today is Luke Waddell, who's one of our younger members of the council that just got elected 2 years ago by a young man. I also have with me our city manager, Tony Carter, 2 deputy city managers, Chad McEwen, Mary Bigu, our interim city attorney, Meredith Everhart, and our budget director, Jennifer Moretti, which I believe many of you know on a personal basis. First, I want to say something about the city of Wilmington. I believe that the city of Wilmington is the poster child for fiscal responsibility and financial resiliency of local government. First, we have a AAA bond rating, and we're very proud of that. It's just been reaffirmed, by the way.
Let me stop you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Burns, are you able to hear better or not?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 30% of our unassigned fund balance sitting in reserve, and we should, since we live on the coast, we have to prepare for those nasty little storms. Our budgets have always been balanced. We have lived within our means as a city, a growing city, and a growing part of the state. Our audits have consistently passed with flying colors with your approval. And I believe we are the very model of what you see state or local government should look like. We believe that this is a generational opportunity for the city of Wilmington. We know that we've had serious long-term space needs for quite some time. When I first got elected in 2003, we were talking about a consolidation of our municipal buildings since we're scattered in 7 different buildings throughout the city of Wilmington. Our facilities are old. They're scattered, and we put a lot of money back into them. I think our oldest building was built in 1929, so that makes it about 94 years of age. And our main municipal building in 305 Chestnut Street was an old savings and loan that we had converted and patched up over the years. But we are a growing part of the state, as I mentioned. A lot of people are moving there, and we are in the service delivery business, as you well know, of city governments. We're substantially, we did a study, we conducted a third-party study about the consolidation of all of our buildings into one building. And that price tag came out at $96 million. And that was in 2022 dollars. For substantially less, we now have the opportunity to not only solve our long-term space needs, but also add 1,000 parking spaces to our northern downtown, which we desperately need because of the success of an amphitheater and what has happened in the northern part of our downtown part of Wilmington. We can do all of this with our existing tax rate, what it is today. We can sell off the surplus property, and that's what our plan is to sell off the surplus property that we currently reside in and pay down that debt. We believe that we can cut down $68 million in half with what we have to sell, which we believe is pretty desirable properties, which we would like to put back into the tax rolls. So I'm going to just put it very simply. We can spend $96 million on a municipal building and another $20 to $30 million for a parking deck in our northern downtown, which we will have to do. Or we can buy this campus and do it all for $68 million. I believe that is a good deal for the city. I believe that's a good deal for the taxpayers that we represent. So this is what you have here before you. You have a city with a bulletproof balance sheet, AAA bond rating, and over 30% of unassigned fund balance sitting in the bank right now. You have a city with a generational opportunity to solve its long-term space needs and add 1,000 spaces to our public parking capacity at a fraction of the cost that we would otherwise have to pay. You have a city with a bipartisan city council, 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats, unanimously behind this, and due diligence that has examined this from every possible angle, with everything pointing to this being a great deal for the taxpayers. And this is an opportunity to show a model system at work, a local government that is fiscally responsible and financially resilient, living within its means, making good, sound business decisions, and respecting the checks and balances of the LGC process. We have our city staff that will be making a presentation to you soon. And I hope that you see what that we see, that this is a great opportunity and it's been well thought out. And Wilmington has a great track record. And I hope that we have an approval from the LGC soon. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Luke Waddell, City Council Member for the City of Wilmington.
Good afternoon to Local Government Commission. My name is Luke Waddell. I'm a councilman for the City of Wilmington. I want to thank you for having us here today and for the opportunity to discuss this exciting acquisition. I'm here today because I'm the fiscal hawk on our council. That is not a self-appointed term. Any of the other folks that are here from Wilmington today can, and I'm sure will attest that I can be a consistent payment. You know what, when it comes to any fiscal or budgetary items as related to our city. So I felt it was important for me to attend alongside Mayor Sapo today, simply because I've examined this acquisition since its inception. I've examined it skeptically and painstakingly, And I've come to the conclusion, as I'm sure you will, once you've received all the information from our staff, that this acquisition of this campus is a once in a generation opportunity. It increases our organizational efficiency via consolidation. It solves our significant space and parking needs for decades to come. And it does all of this without increasing the taxes on our citizens. Our staff, as the mayor alluded, has a presentation for you. You see what we see. I believe that you will. I hope you'll vote to approve this in the very near future so we can move forward with this acquisition and not risk missing this generational opportunity. Sincerely, I want to thank you for your time, your consideration, service to the great state of North Carolina.
Thank you. This time we will allow our city manager, staff to make the presentation.
Does the board desire to hear from the staff first and then ask all our questions after that?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I do, but.
Agreed.
Good afternoon, Mr. Treasurer, members of the commission. My name is Tony Caudle. I'm city manager for the city of Wilmington. Very glad to be before you today to paint the picture of this once in a lifetime acquisition opportunity. We hope that when you get to the end of our presentation, we will have answered most of your questions. We're going to ask your indulgence as we go through a fairly lengthy presentation, but we've heard a lot of questions. We want to make sure we get an opportunity to try to get that information out on the table before we go. To my left, your right is Chad McEwen, our deputy city manager, who is the project manager for this. Chad will be doing the second portion of the presentation. To my right, your left is Jennifer Moretti, our finance director, who will be doing the closing portion of this presentation, going through the numbers for you with regard to how we think this best works. As the oldest horse in the city of Wilmington barn right now, I guess I'm the one who's asked to come forward to talk about it from a historical perspective. I want to read to you what came from a study that was done for the city of Wilmington on space needs analysis. It reads as follows. Space needs assessment and site analysis have determined that consolidating city offices in a group of buildings on the same site or close to each other can be accomplished. It goes on to talk about some of the opportunities that could be done by bringing these sites together. This comes out of a 1994 study. This is now 30 years old with the city of Wilmington. When I joined the city staff and came back to Wilmington almost 15 years ago, my predecessor had $1 million in a capital improvement program designed to do planning for an expansion of City Hall. He guarded that $1 million with his life. None of us were able to attach it. We have several iterations of space needs analyses that we will talk a little bit about today. The property that was originally noted by the mayor a few moments ago had gone on the market quite some time ago. We originally looked at the opportunity and decided that we could not afford it based upon what the tax value was for the property at the time. We later heard that it came on the market and that they would entertain an offer that would be lower. We'll talk about the values of that in just a few moments. No matter what course we pursue, the provision of suitable office space for the staff is now a top priority for the city. We've built new public services facilities, we've built new fire facilities, we've built new police facilities, we're building new parks facilities, but we have not taken care of our downtown staff, our administrative folks, and they are now primarily hosted in a building that is 64 years old and needs millions of dollars of work just to bring it back up to an acceptable standard. Next slide. This slide illustrates for you some of the space issues that we have. It's designed to tell you exactly where we are located with regard to particular operations. Item number one is the Thalian Hall facility, which is the Center for Arts and Government in the city of Wilmington, has been for over 100 years. And we are housing there currently the city manager, city clerk, council chambers, and our diversity, equity, inclusion folks. Immediately across the street is 305 Chestnut, which is our primary office building for our office staff. It houses the city attorney's office, community services, economic development, planning, and finance.
Let me interrupt you. This is very brief.
Yes, sir.
When you say Thalian Hall, that's not where Thalian Associates is.
It is where Thalian is. The Thalian, I can't remember, Thalian Association actually operates out of the USO. Thalian Hall is actually the Performing Arts Center.
It's not where the museum is. That's Thalian Associates, right? There's a display, or when you walk in, and maybe the Chamber of Commerce is in there or something. That's a different Thalian.
I think that must be a different. Oh, you're talking about the old USO building
Yes.
on the corner of Orange and.
That's not number one.
No, sir. That's the old USO building. It's been fully restored by the city.
Where would this relate? What number one is where is it in relation to the library?
It's catty cornered across the street from the library.
Okay, good. All right, I'm with you. Go ahead. Sorry, I just need to get my visuals.
No, sir. I appreciate that. And I would say that particular building will stay there and will continue to be used for arts and potentially some governmental uses. But for now, we anticipate vacating it from a governmental standpoint.
Right.
Immediately across the street from Thalian Hall is a newly acquired office tower, which houses our human resources budget, fire and life safety, communications, and information technology. And then up the street, as a condoed floor, we actually inhabit one floor of 414 Chestnut, which houses our IT operations. Down the street is our Parks and Recreation housing offices. They're approximately 1.7 miles away.
The one that you just interruption. One you just mentioned as newly acquired is number two.
Number three. It's been acquired within the last 3 years.
All right. Go ahead.
Item number 5 is the Parks and Recreation offices that are located 1.7 miles down 3rd Street. And then location number 6 is a new engineering facility. It's an old fire station that we've converted into engineering location simply to be able to house some of our expanded needs with regard to that. It's about 4 miles away. It's closer to the port than it is to the city, the downtown area of the city. Item number 7 is actually located at our Public Works facility, where we had to move our engineering services out to a vacant warehouse when we ran out of office space downtown to be able to keep the engineering folks down there. And then finally, we have a health clinic for the city employees, where we actually lease facility and a storefront and a shopping center. And the folks that frequent the health clinic have to go to that shopping center to be able to take their appointments.
Not a county health clinic, a city employee health clinic.
Yes, sir. It's entirely a city operated operation.
And how many employees do you have?
There are 2.5, I believe.
No.
2.5.
How many city employees do you have?
Oh, I'm sorry. Close to
I
11.
want to meet the half, by the way.
She probably would. 1,100 employees.
All right. Before you go to the next, you go to the next page.
I was going to do a couple more comments.
Oh, the newly acquired building. So that happened in the last 3 years. Because part of the questions we're getting is about clarity of thought and sequence of all this.
I will get to that in just a moment. Hopefully. This particular type of decentralization didn't happen overnight. It's been a long-term goal to consolidate the offices, as I mentioned with regard to the 30-year-old study. Today's dynamic environment requires greatest efficiencies to meet the public needs. Until our recent acquisition of office number 3, the Harrelson building, as we refer to it, we've had to rent space every time we've hired new employees to be able to provide space in which to house the operation. Next slide, please. Out of a 2014 space needs study that was approximately 9 years old now, the scope of the study was to define the office and the office support needs of the city, and it was not a full-scale consolidation as we are looking at today. The study produced three main recommendations. One was to do major repairs and renovations to the existing office building at 305 Chestnut. We had to raise a small building that was immediately adjacent to 305 Chestnut, and we would then build a tower on top of it. That would be the brown box that you see on the right-hand side of your screen. That new tower would be attached to the old 305 and renovated 305 building with a walkway. This was the study that was in place when I joined the city back in 2008.
So you raised the building and
We did not ever raise the building. This was just a neat study that was done. We never implemented the project,
so renovate number one on the previous page and then build a 1A with a bridge to it.
Actually, it was renovate number 2.
Okay.
2 is the office building. Number 1 is Bailey Hall. Yes, ma'am.
Is Alien Hall on the historic register?
Yes, ma'am. Runs every time we went close. In lieu of constructing this additional tower, the city came upon the opportunity to purchase the Harrelson building, which was immediately across the street from Bailey Hall. We chose to do that as opposed to building the tower and consolidating some of our staff people into a building. We've known for a while that we've got a lot of work ahead of us with regard to space needs.
So when that purchase, how much was that?
10 million, just under $11 million.
What type of CapEx or upfitting did you have to do to?
There was very little upfit that was done to that building. It was in good shape when we took it over. It had tenants in it. We've still got tenants in it. We're in the process of trying to retrofit the space for city needs and to allow the folks that have space rented in there to move out as necessary.
To what as necessary?
To move out as necessary. Part of the issue, I'm getting ahead of myself, but part of the issue in purchasing the Harrelson building was the knowledge that we were going to have to redo the 305 and that we would have to have a place to relocate those folks, or at least part of those folks, while we raised 305 and rebuilt that building.
So 305 is the blue.
Yes, sir.
It's the blue on here.
Yes, sir.
And then what percentage of that is used versus rented out currently?
All of it is currently used by the city. The Harrelson building, which is the most recently purchased building, now, and I did not bring those numbers with me, but I believe about a third of the space in the building is leased out to someone else.
At a rate of, generally speaking,
$25 to $28 a square foot.
and that's a triple net lease.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. All right.
Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
And none of these buildings are involved in a 3P partnership. They're all,
Yes, sir.
you own them all.
Yes, sir. We own them all. Yes, sir. Absolutely.
I hope you don't find our interruptions, my interruptions, basically.
Yes, sir. You just may be getting ahead of me, but that's okay.
But it's sort of how we,
That's fine. I'm good with that.
all right, go ahead.
So in 2022, the city's council initiated a third space needs study. The main recommendation coming out of that was that we should raise the 305 building, the office building, and build new. That study was completed in November of 2022. The work spanned over 2 years of investigation and consolidation of work done by a third-party subject who was also the same person who did the previous 2 space needs studies. As I said earlier, the recommend, yes, ma'am.
Did your space needs go down or up or stay the same?
They went up a bit.
I'm shocked that they didn't go down, given the hybrid workspaces work environments now because of COVID. So you're telling me that all your staff's coming in every day?
No, ma'am, not all of our staff. I'd say in general, 90% of our staff is coming in every day. We allow some folks to work from home and work a hybrid model. It is dependent on the department and the department head's responsibility to make sure that the work is done.
So what percentage are remote? What percentage are hybrid?
10?
Perhaps as many as 10%.
That's
Well, is that-
amazing in this.
I interrupted. Is that in terms of bodies or work hours? Because if somebody comes in 1 day out of 5, that could be counted as a body. But if they're working remotely 80% of the week, that would be a different number.
I would say it's 90% of the bodies,
Are coming in 5 days a week.
generally speaking. This
All right.
You've designated positions as hybrid.
There are situations in which department heads are allowed the flexibility to allow someone to work from home. It may not be on a regular basis. It may be on a consistent basis. It depends on the department and the department head and responsibilities of that job position.
And you have agreements or some kind of arrangement.
Yes, sir.
I know I'm getting into HR, but
So you can tell me that if I went there and walked the building, that it would be occupied 5 days a week
Yes, ma'am.
by all departments.
Yes, ma'am.
How are you able to get everybody to come to work? Nobody else can.
Are you able to get to work? What?
How are you able to make your people be in butts in the seat every day and not lose them, given everybody else is going to a hybrid?
I can't tell you the answer to that. I know our turnover rate is somewhere around 12%.
Thank you.
To get my mind clear, the new study that was launched by the people who did the old study, that was in what month of what year?
The latest study was done and completed in November of 22.
But commissioned to start 2 years before?
Yes.
And the building that was purchased in what year?
21.
So the study was done. Oh, don't let me put any words in your mouth.
Yes, sir.
So the study was done, and then the building was acquired. I mean, the study was commissioned. The building was acquired, and then the study was completed long thereafter.
Yes.
To say that the building that was acquired may not be a perfect situation.
Building that was acquired with the idea that eventually we would have to replace one or more of our buildings, and some of our folks would be moved into that building.
Okay, all right. Okay, got it. Okay.
So again, the recommendation was to raise the building and start with a completely blank slate. The new building would need an adjoining parking deck, would consolidate some city departments, plus provide a new city hall space and council chambers. Costs were high. A separate sub-consultant was hired with extensive experience in construction cost estimation. Project costs ranged from $90 to $96 million, which provided 102,000 square feet of gross square footage and 237 space parking deck. Next slide, please.
So this is the picture of, this is an artist rendition of what you were going to build.
Yes, sir. Council was the subcommittee that was working on this was adamant that they wanted to see what it might look like. And so there were extensive discussions regarding design and potential.
This is the building that was going to be built after the other one was torn down. The people who are currently in this the torn down building were going to move to the building you bought.
Yes, sir.
And then once this building was built, they were going to move out of the building, you bought back into here.
Yes. Got it. While we were going through the analysis, the city was also continuing to monitor the real estate market in the downtown area. In December of 2021, Thermo Fisher completed its acquisition of PPD. And in April of 2022, they began to explore sale of their campus.
All right, let's stop there since we talked about.
Is anyone else
I think I've
on the
lost
line?
audio.
Yeah, issues hearing.
I don't know if they can hear us.
The pandemic caused most of them to go home. And according to actually one of their employees who I have a relationship with, he said they were given recently, well, not recently, within the last year, they were given the option of staying remote, doing hybrid, or coming into the office.
And if this were to happen, once this happens, coming into the office would mean what for a Thermo Fisher employee?
I can't tell you.
So what you're saying is, and this is not a rude question, but what you're saying is Thermo Fisher's experience with remote learning is apples and oranges from what you said earlier about 90% of your people are coming into the office.
Yes, sir. I would say typically Thermo Fisher is more of a research-oriented organization. Ours is a service-oriented organization that benefits face-to-face contact and discussion on generally a daily basis.
It's like we are. We're the check delivery business. That's what we do. So, okay. All right. Then
the city was also monitoring other opportunities. As I mentioned, in April 2022, Thermo Fisher began to explore the sale of its campus. I actually had a conversation with Ms. Moretti at one point in time and took a hypothetical number and said, could we afford it if it were this amount of money? And that was based upon an add-on to the value of the tax value of that property. And we assumed we couldn't at that point in time.
what was that number?
That was just over $100 million.
Is there any public documents that show what their basis in the building is?
Excuse me, their basis.
Are there any public documents is Thermo Fisher publicly traded?
Yes, as far as I know.
Is there any public documents that show what their basis in this property is?
Not to my knowledge.
All right. Okay. All right. So how do you think they came up with that number?
I was talking about a property tax reevaluation done by New Hanover County.
Who
I
said
had 20%, I believe it was, to the value of the county valuation. Gave that number to Ms. Moretti and said, could we afford to buy it at that rate, at that amount of money? She said no.
Right. All right.
So the city had the space needs analysis being conducted, and it was completed in November of 2022. And we came upon the PPD Thermo Fisher sale in December of 2022. Came to our attention that the property might be able to be had for a considerable less amount of money than what I had earlier anticipated. We kept our eye out for the opportunity. And when it went from speculative opportunity to recently one that was worth exploring, and we did so.
So Thermo Fisher is the one that bought PPD.
Yes, sir.
From a local
Fred Eshelman, yes, sir.
And then they decided they didn't need the building anymore for lots of different reasons.
Yes, sir.
All right. And then those that choose to go in the office who are still employed there is an economic development question. There will be, you don't know what the answer to this is. They'll be reporting somewhere else other than this building. Is there any chance that if this acquisition goes through by the city, that they will be renting space back from you?
That is included in the model that we have submitted with our application. We have 2 floors, floors 5, 4, and 5 and 6, that are under lease, 3-year lease to Thermo Fisher for office space. We assume that they would be at least partially used, if not completely used, over the course of that.
And seems like a silly question, I'm sure. Why put it right in the middle of your body? Why would you have a private corporation leasing the space, in between? You're above them and you'd be below them, right?
Yes, sir.
What makes floor 5 and 6? Why is that a sweet spot for anybody?
Those 2 existing floor plates have the most flexibility, can house some of the highest levels of employees.
Okay.
Based on their existing design.
Fair answer. Okay. As you were looking around at other things, we're also sort of maybe we are, maybe we aren't dealing with the B of A building.
We did look at the B of A building, sir.
And how close did you get on that?
We thought we were very close with the owner until he offered a deal that frankly was not palatable for the city.
And that transaction is not closed.
That transaction is now with the county. The city backed away from that transaction some 2 years ago.
Right. And it's been generally publicized, not exact numbers, but generally what type of cost that would have been. And you were pursuing it for genuine reasons. You thought it would meet your needs, and tell us about a little bit, even though they may be getting married to somebody else, tell us about what you saw in the value of that.
We actually pursued that as an option prior to pursuing the Harrelson building. We knew that it was mostly vacant at the time. Oddly enough, the previous owner of BPD had his office in there. There were very few other folks that were in that building at the time. We pursued that offer. The owner of the B of A building wanted to do a property swap. I don't remember exactly all of the details of the proposal, but he had us paying an inflated rate for his building and him paying a lesser rate for our building, which was $305. It just did not pencil out to make good sense.
And I'm sure it's public records. Who is the owner of that building?
I do not know. I cannot remember his name. I was working with a real estate agent.
Okay. And board members who are joining us remotely, just butt in if you have any questions. Go ahead.
Next slide, please. Thermo Fisher PPD building provides a unique group of assets for the city. First of all, there's a 12-story office building with over 300 square feet of office space. There's a parking deck. There's 2 additional tracts of land that are available for development purposes. You'll note on the screen in front of you, development tract A was actually a place where the PPD folks were going to build a second office tower, but that never materialized. And development tract B is actually a surface parking lot, which is an underutilization of the property.
And can you get from the parking lot to the building without going outdoors? I mean, without getting wet?
No, sir.
Surprised they built it that way, but they did. Yeah.
So the space needs allowed us to consolidate operations in one building. We don't have to relocate anyone, we don't have to relocate anybody to any other building other than this one. And this is certainly at a cheaper price than what we thought we could build a new building for. This would also give us room for expansion for staff as we grow into the future. The parking deck allows an opportunity to serve the public's parking needs up in this area. For those of you unfamiliar with this particular area, the city's recently built a riverfront park, which would be on the northwest corner of this building. It has an amphitheater and provides a venue for music acts throughout the warmer months of the year. We have been having parking in adjacent neighborhoods and along city streets for folks that attend that venue. We've been looking for an opportunity to provide parking for that venue. We had actually entered into negotiations with PPD to be able to lease the operation of their parking deck. At the time, we were going to work out a deal where they were going to occupy a small percentage of the spaces and we were going to get the rest of them for public purpose. And in the meantime, we would have been the operator of the deck. That deal also fell through at the last minute when PPD came back and said they needed more spaces in the deck than we could afford to pay.
So I know how you felt about that, but when you thought about it logically, was it as confusing to you?
No, sir.
Well, with so many other people working remotely, that's what I'm trying to get at.
And I think that's where, and I'm supposing here.
Sure.
The supposition is that it was coming to the close of the end of the pandemic, and they anticipated bringing more people back into the office than they originally have or have done. We initially had a deal with them where they would reserve 300 spaces in that deck, and we would pay for the operation of the deck. At the last minute, they came back and said they needed 500 spaces out of 1,050 spaces in that deck. We could no longer afford to keep the facility up and only have half the spaces available for public use.
Okay. And when you have an event at the amphitheater, which is very nice, by the way, do people get into that deck now?
No, sir.
It's barricaded.
Yes, sir. It's actually electronic entrance.
Okay. So on development track B and A, what is your vision for that?
We imagine we would go to dispose of those. They'll actually be called surplus property. We'll dispose of them in the way in which we think will bring the most money to the city, either through upset bid or sealed bid. And then thereby taking some of that revenue and buying down the debt on the PPD property.
What's your personal general opinion as far as a staff member making recommendations to your board about sealed versus upset?
It depends on the property. The reason I say that is because we just recently disposed of a public piece of property nearby, adjacent to the downtown area. It went through a sealed bid, and we got an incredible amount of money for that particular piece of property. Generally speaking, if we want to do it expediently, we'll go to a sealed bid. If we don't mind going through a process where we go through an upset bid, we'll certainly recommend it.
And don't be offended by this, but all of things that we deal with all across the state, there seems to be you can see where there could be some skepticism regarding the transparency of a sealed bid and people having an inside track, and that all this stuff is sort of prearranged and it's not as competitive as it might look.
Yes, sir. I understand that completely.
So how do you, what assurances have you put in place or processes to alleviate that concern among the average people?
We haven't gotten that far in the process this far, honestly.
But the other one you just sold on a sealed bid. And you think that if you'd gone to upset bid, it would have gotten a lower price?
I'm almost positive it would now. We had two bids on that piece of property. One was just under $900,000. The other one was $10,000. I'm certain if it had been an upset bid process, the person who bid the higher number would have just had to bid probably in a 5-figure number to be able to get that property as opposed to the upper sixes.
Okay. Are you anticipating on developed track, and members just chime in, on track B and A, is there any reason that you would utilize some of the statutes that exist for downtown Wilmington as far as development and that kind of thing, as far as private-public partnerships? Are you totally certain that you're going to sell this outright and be done with it?
Mr. Treasurer, with my mayor sitting right behind me, I will tell you that the staff recommendation will be to sell it outright.
Are you riding with him?
I have no idea. I just want you to know
Oh,
that he may override me.
Okay. All right.
4 votes of that council will override. But the red staff recommendation will be to sell the properties outright. Reason being is that my experience with the 3Ps has been that private developers prefer to get into deals where they think they can save some money, and they generally try to do that on the acquisition price of the property, and that the city generally does not get full value out of that property until later as a result of the tax implications and the growth that occurs on those properties.
And how big is A and B versus the footprint that the building sits on now? I mean, I can see it visually, but A looks pretty big.
A is 3.4 acres. B, which is what you're looking at, is not all of B. It kind of wraps around to the back of the building along Nut Street. It's about 3.3 acres.
Wow. So because of the way it's figured, B and A are about the same acreage, but it's just cut up a little funny.
Yes, sir. You can't, because of the tower, the way the tower sits on that map, you can't see how track B actually wraps around almost parallel within about 70, 80 feet of the south side of the tower.
Can you see the water from B or A? Not too much.
You can't see it, generally speaking, from either track, mainly because of the development that's associated right next door to it. The new parking deck immediately adjacent to track A has obscured views to the water. You could get on the northwest corner of that track, overview the concert venue as well as the river. But the development track B is completely obscured by an apartment complex mixed-use development.
So did you say that's a parking deck?
That's a certain development track B is a surface parking.
No, I'm
lot.
talking about A. Is that that gray thing? Is that a parking deck beside A?
Yes, sir.
And who owns that?
It is owned by a developer out of Washington, the Washington D.C. area.
I guess they rent spaces for them.
It's primarily for a residential building that's going to go on the west side of that parking deck, immediately adjacent to the water. You'll see, if you look closely in the picture, the elevator tower that has gone in. Since they have constructed that elevator tower, they have now probably framed out all of the apartments that are on that property.
And what's the height restriction in this area for building a building?
The height restriction is, I believe, 15 stories. 15 stories, I believe.
And PPD is how?
13. Now 13 counting the utility penthouse.
Okay. Sorry, keep going.
It's fine. Next slide.
Mr. Treasurer, Paul
Mr. Butler.
Butler,
Yeah.
can we go back to the previous slide?
Yes.
Treasurer, can we go back to the previous slide?
Yes, sir.
What before this one?
Yeah.
When Thermo bought this in December of 21 or initiated the purchase and completed the sale in less than 4 months, and with the decision to start selling the building, was there ever any effort that you're aware of where the North Carolina Partnership for Economic Development was advised of the availability of this building? Was it ever listed with the state for sale?
To my knowledge, I do know that the Regional Economic Development Arm that represents New Hanover, Pender, and Brunswick counties, or New Hanover, Pender counties, was aware of the availability of the office space and was marketing it, but I do not know of anything beyond that.
You do not know if it ever was Chris Chung and the State Partnership of Economic Development, as it was listed formerly as a building available down in Wilmington, North Carolina.
To my knowledge, Mr. Chung was not ever contacted, but I was only on the periphery of this sale from the beginning and don't have any knowledge about what transpired outside of what the city of Wilmington has done with regard to the outreach to Thermo Fisher.
Is it usual to buy a building and then immediately begin to want to sell off part of it?
You mean
Building of this size?
You indicate selling off the additional tracks?
Yes.
It is unusual, but the city would not have any need for those tracts of land. If we can go back to the slide with the picture on, please.
Okay. Thank you, Treasurer. If you can move forward now.
Well, he let him finish his answer. Thank you, Mr. Butler. Go ahead.
Development Tract A is from an economic development standpoint, is a beautiful piece of property. It was designed to hold a second tower for PPD, and it just never materialized. The city really would have no reason to build on that property, especially if we acquired the building itself. The Development Tract B would be an interesting tract because we are having a difficult problem with the provision of hotel rooms in the downtown area. Our convention center cannot always book enough rooms for the conventioneers simply because of the popularity of the music venue immediately adjacent. In other words, hotels can get more money out of folks who are going to the concerts than the folks that are going to the conventions. And so we're battling with ourselves in terms of trying to provide hotels. And we believe Development Tract B would represent a good opportunity for some hotelier to be able to build in association with the convention center.
So there's a hotel room desert a little bit.
Yes, sir. Didn't anticipate that when the convention center was built, but the development on the north end of downtown has far exceeded most everybody's expectations, and then the construction of the park and the music venue has really put it over the top.
Keep on.
Next slide, please. So this talks a little bit about the unique opportunities that we have and we see with this building. First of all, and probably most importantly, is the parking structure. It's been something we've been trying to aim at for quite some time. It allows us to put 1,000 spaces in that area, mainly for weekend and weeknight uses. We anticipate that a good portion of that parking deck will be used for folks who are housed in the evenings, and over the weekends, it would provide additional spaces for the area, for businesses in the area. The council chambers gives us an opportunity to expand to a site that is probably more appropriate. Generally speaking, our council chambers is adequate for what we need, but when we have overflow issues that come before council, it would be helpful to have the additional space. Security has become a major issue with the city of Wilmington, as with many folks in the public sector. We find that it just is not as safe a world as it used to be. We have had some issues associated with folks who have been disgruntled with our services and have threatened our staff. As a result, we've had to hire security guards to be able to protect the buildings and the areas around the building. PPD building, Thermo Fisher building, gives us an opportunity for one point of ingress and egress that would then be triggered by electronic locks. If any of you were in a situation where you wanted to go see the PPD building, you would find, the Thermo Fisher building, you would find that you needed to provide personal information a day ahead of time before you could get into the building. This gives us an opportunity to provide for better security for our employees.
600-person council room?
Potentially, yes, sir. It can be divided into 6 different rooms. It's got dividers in it. so it can be divided into 6 different rooms and gives us an opportunity to have breakout rooms at the same time. We also believe that this proved to be a benefit to the convention center if they have overflow situation in which they need additional meeting space.
Okay.
The data center and the generators are also another factor that are important to us. We need to be able to move our current data center out of the antiquated facility in which it's currently located. And this particular business opportunity gives us a glimpse at what we could do with regard to housing all of our servers and our connections in one location. In addition, there are 2 generators in the basement that have their own fuel tank, and they would power at least a portion of the building. And you know, that kind of thing is important on the coast as we face on an annual basis hurricane threats.
What's that body of water in there?
The Cape Fear River.
And this building is in what kind of floodplain?
It is not in a floodplain.
Ever?
I think there's a corner of the property.
There's a small portion of, I believe it's development tract B that's in the 500. There's significant elevation change between the surface of the river up to this property.
Is there any floodplain issues or rock issues or any other kinds of issues that would keep the development site A or B from being fully equitized?
Both of those tracks are under a Brownsfield agreement that is valid. It is sanctioned by the state of North Carolina at this point in time. Other than that, we have no reason to believe there's any reason that property would not be capable.
And the brownfield was the result of what industry?
There was a ship. This was a working waterfront for the shipping industry, predominantly creosote used in that area, but there were a number of items going on down there. When I was a child, there were a number of items, a number of things going on that waterfront that probably was not good stuff.
Good question, Secretary. Go ahead. All right.
So the generators give us the opportunity to move back into the building and make it operational following a storm, even if we do not have central power from Duke Power. The vault and file room is something that our city clerk is extremely excited about. She currently has records, valuable records, historical records that are located in 2 antiquated vault systems. The vault system that is located in the PPD building is not only sufficient to house all of her records, but gives her growth opportunity, as well as a fire suppression system that is second to none. And then finally, there is a location on the ground floor for a health clinic. You will recall that one of the remote locations that we showed in the earlier slide was that there was a health clinic that the city now actually rents storefront for. This would allow us to move it into a city facility, thereby eliminating the need for the rental, and then also making it more centralized, at least for the 300 to 400 employees that would be housed in this particular location. Next, please. Generally speaking, the proposed acquisition would be 50 to 60% used and controlled by the city. There is an existing lease with Thermo Fisher that if the purchase goes through, the lease will be enacted, which brings in revenue as well as occupies office space. The remainder of the building not used by the city or leased back by the current seller would then be leased out in terms of market rates for local businesses. Been a strong market in the downtown Wilmington in terms of office rentals. Anecdotally, we believe that the current occupancy rate's about 4%, and we believe that it is quote unquote a hot market, so to speak. But I do not want to confuse the acquisition of this building with an economic development project. This is an acquisition for office space and potential for future use. The economic development portion of it is just ancillary to the actual use of the building. We would only allow others to occupy space as was necessary and it was not needed by the city. We've received multiple inquiries regarding the use of some of the vacant spaces. We have yet to enter into serious negotiations with anyone simply because we do not yet know whether we're going to.
Would you strongly disagree with any other opinions about the softness of downtown Wilmington commercial space?
Without further investigation, no, sir, I would not.
Would not what?
I would not disagree with you.
That it's softer, that, I messed it up, not you. Okay. That right above us, we own more real estate in the country than anyone in North Carolina in our pension plan that we're participating in. And we're seeing unbelievable declines in commercial real estate values. And we're seeing explosive spreads as far as the interest rate that people have to pay to refinance these loans that they got seduced with low interest rates. Now they're in a balloon situation, some 12%. And so some buildings, not Wilmington, obviously, but other parts of the United States that were on the market for 300 million are now trading at 60 million. Are you saying that everything I've just described, that's not present in downtown Wilmington commercial real estate market, not the hotel key market, commercial real estate?
I would not disagree with that statement without doing more research into it. The anecdotal 4% vacancy rate is just something that has been provided, again, anecdotally. But I would argue that the market downtown does seem to be stronger than it is in the outlying areas. I would also say that we've got significant interest not only in space available within the potential Thermo Fisher property, but also a good deal of interest in one of our properties that we would sell as a result of it.
Okay. Okay. Proceed.
I'm going to turn this over to Mr. McEwen now.
We're probably going to have a lot of questions, I imagine, and we're going to try to get y'all out of here by 4:15 at the latest, so you can not get stuck in what you're going to get stuck in. That may not help you, but so, and I mean this in the most respectful way. Anything that's in the remaining part of the handout that's sort of a blind glimpse of the obvious, don't feel compelled to go over it just because it's in the handout. I'm not the smartest person in the room. They've been to these before, and so anything that just jumps off is, they can read it, they can see it. I don't need to explain it. That's okay with us. That gives us more time to answer questions. Get y'all on the road.
Thank you, Mr. Call. Thank you, Mr. State Treasurer, members of the LGC, for the opportunity to speak to you today about this transformative opportunity for the city related to the potential Thermo Fisher acquisition. Next slide, please. My name is Chad McEwen. I'm Deputy City Manager and been handling the transactional aspects of the proposed Thermo Fisher acquisition. At 30,000 foot level, the proposed purchase price, contract price is $68 million with a $500,000 refundable deposit that is refundable up until June 11th. At 3 days later, after June 11th, June 14th, the city will be required to provide a non-refundable additional $300,000 deposit in order to stay in the contract. Both of those deposits
Communicate with them.
it will indicate here commercial
Do you know when that listing runs out?
Hi, I'm sorry, but the folks who were remote, lost audio there for about 10 minutes. I mean, 15, 20 seconds.
Okay. Are you good now, Mr. Burns?
Yes, I am.
All right, thank you. Okay. Do you know when that contract expires?
I do not.
Can you find that out for us?
We can ask. Yes, sir. Next slide, please.
Well, one more question about this. This whole $10 million thing that we keep hearing about, where's that? Is that news to you? That if you don't close this by a certain day, somebody's got to pay somebody $10 million?
We've heard the same rumors. We have no idea about the basis for that, whether it's factual or not. It's not involved in any part of our transaction or contract related to the Thermo purchase. So really can't speak to the validity of it, exist or not.
I'll push it a little harder.
I think you might need to figure out if it's valid or not. Well,
Go ahead.
when you say that we've heard about, I've received nothing, not this slide, not anything, just it was on the, has there been communication that has not been shared with everybody?
No. Has there been any, would tell Secretary what's been publicized or what's been said as far as what you're hearing down there?
I think what we've heard is very similar to what you've heard, Mr. Treasurer, is that there's been discussion about a potential $10 million payment that's due between PPD and Thermo. But again, that is not reflected in any part of our PSA with Thermo Fisher. It's not related to our deal. It's not contingent upon our deal. And really, there's not been any reason for us to dig in or find out any more about it.
For all we know, that could be a $10 million interest payment that's due on a loan at that point in time. We just don't know.
But if it doesn't modify your deal.
No,
No, it's not at all.
But if somebody doesn't hit a deadline, does it raise the cost of this purchase? That's all I'm getting at. So how long is this purchase agreement for?
We are scheduled to close. We have a hard deadline to close by July 31st of this year. We anticipate closing July 13th. Everything is in order for us to close July 13th.
I believe the correct answer to that question was, it doesn't raise the cost of purchase for them.
Exactly correct.
But we're inked in at 68 million.
It may raise the cost of purchase, but not for them.
Go ahead.
Okay, next slide, please. In terms of due diligence, the city conducted a pretty extensive effort related to several aspects of getting the property evaluated. First, property appraisals, not only the existing Thermo Fisher property, but the properties Mr. Caudill outlined that the city has conditionally surplus that would sell contingent upon sale or purchase of Thermo Fisher. Got an Alta survey completed. We've also secured the services of Parker Poe as outside counsel to assist us. We've conducted a full facility assessment of the property that included basically those 5 components at the bottom. I will highlight one component of that that's very important to the city, which is the asset inventory. What's not been mentioned yet is that $68 million includes the property being purchased, fully furnished, fully operational, except for anything in the building that is proprietary or office equipment, computers, hard drives, those type of things. As common with a facility condition assessment, there was a condition assessment done very similar to what you would have done for your home if you were selling or purchasing a home. The O&M analysis so the city could gain knowledge of what it was going to cost on an annual basis to own and operate that building was also conducted. Combined with the condition assessment, CapEx forecast was done to determine not only the condition of the building, but components of the building that were going to be needed to be addressed in the near future, as well as prices related to those capital expenditures were provided. As Mr. Caudill mentioned, there is some Brownsfield property related to the overall purchase. The compliance report was provided by Terracon, which is our contractor. There are no compliance issues related to the Brownsfield agreement that was filed with the state, as well as filed with Hanover County. fulfilling the obligations of the due diligence, the city sought subject matter experts, special expertise in the various areas related to the due diligence components. Again, Terracon was hired to do the facility condition assessment. Terracon has done very similar projects for high-rise buildings throughout the East Coast. It recently completed one downtown Charlotte for a building that's very commonly known and visible, much larger than the PPD building, but they have extensive experience in large square footage facility condition assessment projects. In terms of the appraisal, we reached out to Colliers International, who again has extensive experience in large square footage Class A appraisals for high-rise buildings. Again, the compliance report was provided for the brownfield agreement via Terracon as part of the facilities condition assessment.
Is this Class A on the way to A negative or Class A period?
The comment was made to us from Terracon, the project manager, that that building is in as good a shape as any 18-year-old building he's ever entered. Service records, files we've been provided are impeccable in terms of not only the general maintenance, but the promptness of repairs done on items that needed addressing over the years for that building. But they were very complimentary of all operational maintenance components of the building. Next slide, please. The appraisal report done by Colliers was conducted on February 16th, 2023. And you see a breakdown here of the appraisal report. The key components of the appraisal and the property in general involve undeveloped land, which is represented in Track A, previously discussed. See the 3.3 and 3.4 acre amounts there for Track A and B. Also, parking is another key component, and then obviously the high-rise building itself, the office building, is listed there along with the acreage and breakdown between the appraised value, land value, and improvement value related to each of those components. If you look there in the third column at the very bottom, you see the total appraised value of $111,300,000 for the building, including all undeveloped land, parking deck, as well as the tower.
And the Secretary Marshal's comment, I think that was said on a radio show about the $10 million, if you want to know the source of it. Go ahead.
Next slide, please.
Has there been an assessment of the parking deck? Has there been an assessment of the parking deck?
Condition assessment or value assessment?
Condition and value.
Yes, to both. Terracon did a complete evaluation of parking deck, and the parking deck passed all structural components. No major issues with the deck. Value-wise, yes, the deck in the previous slide is itemized out between not only the deck improvement value, but also the land value. I think it's a total of about 26 million.
I buy that.
Okay.
And is there a cap rate in terms of what you think you can rent that for during venues and things, or?
We discussed internally the prospects of, if there's a concert, what that can yield, somewhere between $15 and $20 a space. But again, there's going to have to be further analysis of that. Obviously,
I'll expect you to know the answer to this. What's the cost per space
to construct?
I mean, what you're buying versus the space you're getting. We deal with that a lot around here. The cost per space. I'll just do it in my head while you're talking.
If you take, I can do the math real quick.
1,500.
26 million divided by 1,040. That would be the space per cost per space. There's also an additional 240 spaces underneath the building, and the surface lot contains 260 spaces. So that's where you get the cobble together the 1,500 total spaces for the property.
I was wondering that. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Has nothing to do with the amount PPD needs.
Correct. The lease for PPD includes a parking allocation right there.
Okay.
Yes. When we look at the value discussion in very general terms initially, first thing we did, as Mr. Caldwell mentioned, was we looked at the tax assessed value of the property. real property only listed here between the land value as well as the improvement value. Tax assessed value of the property, including development tract A, B, parking deck, as well as the tower, was $91.4 million. Again, the appraisal amounts listed there on the second row, $111 million. We did the facility condition assessment, obviously, as I mentioned earlier. One component of that was plant replacement value, ERB analysis. And according to the facility condition assessment, to reconstruct that tower the way it exists, without land, without FF&E, costs $251 million in today's money. Again, that bottom row there reflects our purchase price of $68 million. So this slide drives home the thought that whatever metrics you use, tax assessed value, which is one of the more conservative mechanisms you can use to determine value, all the way to the facility condition assessment of $251 million of value, $68 million we're paying falls far below any of those metrics.
So why is the land value is really different, right? Am I reading that right? 8.7 million versus 40.6?
Correct.
Tax assessment,
Correct.
that's a big difference, just for land.
Correct. It is between tax assessed value and appraised value.
And you have no clue why.
No, a lot of times tax assessed value, as you know, lags behind fair market or appraised value. We'll probably attribute that to.
When was this? When was the last one? I thought you said it was. I was thinking you were saying it was more recently, but
The appraisal was done February 6th.
tax assessed value. When was the last assessment done by? Just 2 years ago. Yeah, so it's not that far behind. Not this much difference. That really does drive up your appraisal value. But anyway, I still am surprised. It appraises at what it does, even the tax assessed value at what it is, and you're getting it for 68. What's wrong with it?
Sounds like nothing. Sounds like a great deal. This slide, I think, of all the slides, in terms of the value discussion, is as important as anything. Reflects basically our global effort to look at the value and compare it and reflect it on the purchase price that we're paying. Again, pointing out that the purchase price does not include that we're getting the building fully furnished. And I've said that a couple of times, but we've discussed it internally. The value of that is immense from a financial standpoint, but as much an operational standpoint, to where we can run parallel offices for a smoother transition for the public, where we don't have to close offices and expect the public to find the new office that they have to get service in. We can run parallel offices, have furnishings at both, which would better serve the public in that transition.
This is the most valuable piece of office space in New Hanover County, right?
I would say so.
So is there a hold harmless with the county as far as this thing being off the tax rolls?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Sorry I brought that up. I'm sure they thought about it.
Okay, go ahead. Next slide, please.
Mr. Treasurer.
Yes, Mr. Butler.
No, Mr. Philbeck this time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
One thing, Madam Auditor, that could be a part of that bigger difference than normal between tax value and appraised value in February of this year is that if their last reval was effective 2 years ago, the research for that was done over the 18 months or so before that. And since that time, 3 or 3.5 years ago, that's when we've had a ton of run up in real estate prices for whatever it's worth.
Thank you.
Again, to the value component discussion related to the purchase, there are three primary value components. We'll skip on and talk about those. The first being land. Next slide, please. Land, here's where you see information about the comps. Comps listed there and adjusted, representing adjusted values for the Thermo Fisher property, reflected $75 a square foot rate for the landowner. That's reflected in the previous slide several slides back on development track A and B. That's the basis. During all this, and talk about comparatively speaking, 75 sounds like a very strong number, but in light of what happened approximately 2 weeks ago on a sale a few blocks north of there for very comparable property in terms of location, but considerably smaller, that property listed there on 4/21/23 sold for $204 a square foot. $6 million for less than 3/4 of an acre in downtown Wilmington. So with that in mind, 75 that we're paying or that we're receiving through appraised value seems very reasonable in light of it could be an anomaly in the market that high, but there's still a great amount of buffer between 204 and 75 in our minds.
Who came up with the 68 or the 70 million?
In terms of our negotiation, our original offer was $60 million. We did not receive a response. And we were basically told that it was going to have to be in the high 60s. We went back to council in our discussions. And the way to justify it was what I mentioned earlier about the furnishing concern. We would offer 68, but it would come fully furnished, which they ended up agreeing to in the contract.
Have they gotten close to the altar with any other sellers?
Not to our knowledge. There's not been any other contract to our knowledge.
Maybe it didn't get to a contract level. Are you aware of any other potential bidders for this property at much lower values?
We understand that there were other offers that were submitted that were not necessarily responded to or countered. And that's indicative of when we submitted an offer of 60 and it was not counted. We were told that's not going to get it. Here's where they need to be.
So what you just referred to is maybe in the 50 level.
That's our understanding, is there was some other offers that came along that line.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide, please. Transitioning to the parking component. In December of 2020, the city commissioned Kinley Horn and Associates to do a parking study related to the parking demand in the northern waterfront district of the city. The report came back in December of 2020. It said that there was an unmet need of 1,050 spaces. We recently asked Kinley Horn to update that study, and they said that parking space allocation need is still unmet, which is easy to understand because nothing substantial has been built or allocated for public parking in that area of the city between 2020 and to date. We estimate that that a parking deck will cost about $25,000 a space. That's based on industry standards and reports verified via that parking study done by Kinley Horn. So if you take 1,050 parking space deck times 25,000, you get that math there listed on the far right.
I suggest you not go to a Board of Governors meeting and hear what they're talking about for spot parking places.
Higher.
It's a wild, wild west. So anyway.
All right, next slide, please.
I think that's pretty self-explanatory. We'll use that.
That would be the allocation available during the various times of the day and weekend. Next slide, please. In terms of the building, again, this is the third aspect of value. The cost to build reflected in the facility condition assessment. Again, the facility condition assessment does not reflect FF&E or land value. That number came out at $627 a square foot for the 96,102,000 square foot building. I'm sorry, for Thermo Fisher. The $866 square foot number reflected up there is for the 102,000 square foot building at $96 million price tag. The city was looking at building redevelopment of 305 Chestnut. On the far right side, you see the cost to buy as a comparison to the cost to build. The cost to purchase Thermo Fisher at 371,000 square feet and $68 million is $183 a square foot. Downtown going rate from information we've received is about $194 a square foot. So in general terms, if you look at the need has not changed in terms of parking or our need to consolidate and provide adequate space for city departments. Our options are essentially at this point to move forward with the purchase of Thermo Fisher to solve the parking issue, the space issue at a price tag of $68 million. If that is not a viable option or approved option, it's highly likely that in the next few years, we'll be back at the LGC asking for approval to fund the construction of a deck at a $25 to $30 million price tag in that same part of the city, as well as potentially a $96 million building to solve the space needs. Next slide, please. At our most conservative estimates, the value cost presented by this project is 2 to 1. The value of $111 million obviously reflected there on the breakdown between parking, land, and office space. Then on the right side, the $68 million price reflects what we're getting for that money. 3 times the square footage of an office building compared to what we would build for $96 million. We're getting 12.5 acres of land, 7 of which is able to be redeveloped and sold. And then we're also getting 1,500 parking spaces at an estimated value of $25,000 per space. Considerable return on investment in terms of our value discussion. And with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Peretti for the financial aspects of the project. And we'll try to save some time for questions.
Good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Moretti, the Finance Director with the City of Wilmington. I will walk you through the project financing plan, as well as explain how the city came to our current position of being able to finance this project without having a tax. Next slide.
Initially, there was a tax increase. What changed?
We'll walk through that, different things that came to our.
That's a question I get a lot.
The financing of this property acquisition is for $68 million at 20-year level principal payment.
Sorry.
Did a great job. Mike's up in the financing of this property acquisition is for $68 million at 20-year level principal payment. As you've heard up to this point, the project will have private use as well as public use, and therefore we've structured the financing conservatively to be 50% taxable and 50% tax exempt. The taxable portion is separated by 2 series, B and C. Series B is a taxable variable rate for $23.8 million that we partnered with Truist Bank on. This is structured to allow prepayment at any time without penalty. As discussed previously, the city will be vacating several properties as well as acquire a vacant parcel and also subdivide the parcel the building is on and sell that piece, currently used as the surface lot. The proceeds from these sales will allow the city to prepay the Series B debt. We will also be able to refinance it at a fixed rate in the future if necessary. I do want to make sure everyone understands that this financing plan is not contingent on any sale of property. We are financing the full $68 million and that our financial model supports repayment of the full amount regardless whether any properties are sold. Proceeds from any sales would allow the city to prepay debt, reducing our debt liability and increasing our debt capacity going forward. Series C is the remaining taxable portion that will be a fixed rate financing for $10.2 million. And Series D will be the final portion, tax exempt, for $34 million. Next slide. The city has seen continued growth in our tax base year over year, as shown with this slide. The county performs the revaluation on a 4-year cycle, with 2018 and 2022 being revaluation years. You can see the increase in value that the city had in both cycles. The information we most recently received from the tax administrator shows the city's projected 2024 tax assessment growth is at 3.6% over the current year. This will provide over $3 million of new tax revenue for fiscal year 24. Next slide. As we have been working through the financing plan, as well as the city's recommended FY24 budget, there have been multiple opportunities that allow the city to be in a position to make adjustments to our projections that resulted in the city now being able to move forward with this project and be able to satisfy the debt service payments without having to increase the tax rate for the city. Let me walk you through how these changes came about. The city's current tax rate is 39.5 cents and is allocated between our general fund and our debt service fund. The general fund receives 32.37 cents of the 39.5-cent rate, and the debt service fund receives 7.13 cents. When this opportunity first came to the city, we projected that it may take a 3-cent tax increase to be able to finance it. We worked with our financing team and had better numbers, and when we met with the LGC staff on February 23rd for our pre-application meeting, we projected a tax rate increase of 2.5 cents at that time based on a tax assessed value of $21.8 billion, which has conservative growth over the current year as we maintain our debt model with conservative projections and not yet having information from the tax office. This would result in a tax rate going from 39.5 cents to 42 cents and the allocation increasing in the debt service fund to 9.63 cents of the tax rate. When we submitted our LGC application on March 31st, we had additional information that allowed us to reduce the tax rate projection to 1.5 cents being needed. We received notice from the tax administrator on March 17th that our 2024 tax assessed values were projected to be $22.37 billion. Also, working on our fiscal year 24 recommended budget and our fiscal year 23 full year estimates, we realized that the $11 million of appropriated fund balance in the general fund for fiscal year 23 would not be needed. In fact, with the revenues coming in higher than estimated and expenses estimated to be lower than budget, we would be adding funding to the fund balance at year end. This allowed us to include a transfer of $8.5 million of fund balance from the general fund to the debt service fund, still allowing additional funding to be added in the general fund and keeping within our policy on fund balance. These changes made the tax rate change to 41 cents, with the allocation now 8.63 cents going to the debt service fund. Next slide. As we continued with our budget discussions, we had additional information come in that allowed us to make the final change in our projections that eliminated the need for a tax increase at all. We received our final projections from the tax administrator on April 21st. Now showing our tax assessed value increasing to $22.6 billion. On April 26th, we sold the 2023 A Series lots at an all-in TIC of 3.49 cents, lower than the 5% that we have projected in our debt model. We also were able to move a capital project from the fiscal year 24 recommended budget, as council wants to focus more on streets over the next year, and our engineering department indicated that they would not be able to get to this project in the next year. These changes reduced the need for additional tax revenue in the debt service fund to 1.12 cents. Having the additional tax revenue coming in and reviewing the departmental requests for fiscal year 24 that were new or enhanced ongoing continuous requests, the decision was made to reduce the new request going into the recommended budget and reallocate the tax rate between the general fund and the debt service fund, allowing the additional funding to go into the debt service fund. This changes the allocation to 31.25 cents for the general fund and 8.25 cents for the debt service fund. We are still recommending a budget that has over $3 million of new departmental requests that have ongoing costs for new positions, etc., above the current service levels, maintaining or exceeding the reserve balances for both the general fund and the debt service fund, and presenting a budget that includes the financing for this project with no tax increase needed. Next slide. This slide has a lot of information on it and is not a favorite from a presentation standpoint, but this is a summary from our debt model that we use to track existing and projected debt service, as well as all the inflows and outflows of our debt service fund going out for over 20 years. This allows us to calculate the need for a tax increase for any future projected plans, track our ending balance, make sure it does not fall below our 30% of operating needs, which is higher than our policy for strong fiscal management and account for any adjustments that we may make within the fund. I'll quickly walk through to show you the adjustments we made related to this project. On the top of this slide is the project we're discussing today, $68 million. To the right of that, we have the labs we just closed that this board approved last month. That is now included in our existing debt service numbers below. We are projecting another lab sale next year for $29.6 million and the following year at $13.2. All of that is shown in our new debt service in the chart below. For 2024 fiscal year in the chart below, we have the beginning balance, the transfer from the general fund, which includes the annual transfer of $9.3 million, plus the $8.5 million that I discussed a moment ago. We have our property tax revenue coming into the debt service fund, which is that growth we're seeing from the tax values of 24, as well as reallocation of that tax rate from the general fund to the debt service fund. We have in here the revenue from the thermo lease, $1.8 million over 3 years. Then we have our existing debt, which includes the 2023 A labs, the new debt service, which will be for this deal, as well as the 24 and 25 deals. Our PAYGO on our capital expenditures, we maintain a 80% debt, 20% financing. 20% of PAYGO is transferred from the debt service fund over to our capital projects. For 24, in addition to that, is $3.2 million that we would transfer over for upfit costs and moving allocation costs for this project. You can see in the final column, the ending balance for 2029 is our lowest balance of $8.2 million. That is at our 30% reserve level of operating budget. So we maintain no less than 30% this month. Next slide.
I think this is pretty much self-explanatory.
Yes, sir. Just to highlight all of the projections and conservativeness that we hold in our debt. I do want to mention that we are AAA bond rating from all 3 credit rating agencies, recently confirmed with our 2023 A sales. Some of the comments from the rating agencies from Moody's: the city's financial position is very strong and will remain so given conservative budgeting and formal policies. Long-term liabilities are manageable, as are fixed costs. From Fitch, the AAA GEO rating reflects the city's continued robust financial profile, benefiting from significant revenue and expenditure flexibility, strong operating performance, and high reserves. The city's long-term liability burden is low relative to personal income and is expected to remain so, given its conservative debt management, affordable pension, and other post-employment benefit liabilities. From S&P, the rating reflects our view of Wilmington's strong tax base and seasoned management team that maintains a range of comprehensive, formalized financial policies and practices. These factors have contributed to the city's long-term trend of balanced financial operations and healthy reserve levels. While the city is planning for additional debt issuance subsequent to this one, we anticipate management will continue to make budgetary adjustments as necessary to incorporate increased debt service. Next slide.
We're aware of that one.
I just want to mention that as a local government entity, we appreciate the oversight and guidance the LGC provides us. We believe the information we have presented here today demonstrates the merits of this project, and the city's application for financing approval satisfies the matters and facts that the Commission takes into consideration when approving the contract. We have demonstrated the value of this project far exceeds the purchase price, as well as allows for further benefits of ability to sell properties and pay down debt, generate revenue from parking and office leases, and most importantly, meeting the needs of the city for office space with availability for growth, as well as the needs for parking in the northern downtown area, and being able to finance this project without the need for increased taxes. Next slide. This is the calendar for our financing and acquisition schedule. We held our public hearing April 18th. We had expected LGC approval today at this meeting. Since we're here doing the presentation, will that be postponed to June, or when can we expect the applications to be reviewed for approval?
Staff will get back in touch with you about that. We answer all the questions.
Our city council will approve our 24 budget on June 20. And as mentioned previously, if everything goes forward with the approvals, we plan on closing on the property July 13th and do have that hard closing July 31st on this property. So we do not lose this deal.
May I ask a question, Mr. Treasurer?
Yeah, you have the floor, Mr. Burns.
I was just wondering, looking at this schedule, are there any further public meetings or public hearings that are needed for the city to undertake this project after LGC approval?
No.
No, sir. There will only be the annual budget approval, which will have no bearing on this.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Other questions from remote members? Questions from members that are here? Yes, ma'am.
Can you give me a general sense of your public hearing? How well attended and comments?
Generally speaking, we had, I believe, 5 speakers. There were 3 who were opposed to it simply because of the tax increase that was proposed at the time. 2 folks spoke in favor of it, including the exec from our Chamber of Commerce. I think it's safe to say that the proposal enjoys the support of the business community, and I don't know that there's any opposition to it as a result of the tax increase being taken out of the proposal.
Other questions from board members? Questions from staff? Before I forget, I want to thank not only staff but Joa for standing in the well today to fill in, and thank you, Joa, for doing all that. Just a couple of questions. I know it's in here somewhere. Don't spend a lot of time on it, but the expected proceeds from the sale of surplus property is estimated to be what?
19 million.
And it's been said or reported somewhere down in your neck of the woods that who may get those properties? Is there, have you, what do you have any concerns about conflicts about the people who are representing the seller of this building from a real estate standpoint? And then it's a potential bidder on some of these surplus properties.
We have no concerns about Cushman Wakefield being a conflict of interest. As Mr. McEwen said earlier, there is a local representative, but he's not associated with the city in any way, shape, or form. I don't know who's going to bid on the properties. And I understand your concern about openness in the bid process. So.
Because there's a lot of things going on with this property, your surplus property, Project Grace, some bridge that we need to talk about at some point in the future. And, you know, so land, involuntary conversion, there's just a lot of drama among, and the names, it's not 1,000 names that come up in these stories. It's, you know, normally 2 to 3 names. And that's why I'm asking. I'm not asking the question to be confrontational. I'm just asking the question to get it out in the open for people who may be listening to us.
Yes, sir. I understand the origin of your question. Do not feel defensive as a result of it. I will say that Wilmington is still a small town.
Right.
And the number of players in that town, so to speak, in terms of economic development and real estate are not numerous. Let's put it that way. Yes, sir. And I think that our council recognizes the inherent potential conflict associated with that and guards against it as best they can. I would say that we probably will get some proposals from 1 or 2 of those firms. But again, we would be going through it in a transparent fashion in order to make sure that everything is well.
Have you heard any criticism about the city leaders taking the most pristine floors of this building?
The only criticism we've heard has been from our own council members. We're in the process now of engaging a firm, a local firm, and doing an analysis of which of these floors would be best for the city to use based essentially on leasable floor space, the amount of money that can be gained from those leasable floor spaces, and which ones cause the lease conversion cost for the city.
But what does that have to do with the top floors are going to be the most valuable floors? You won't need an analysis of that, but that would be something that would be obvious.
No, sir, but the issue is that top floors are much smaller than the lower floors. You can rent a larger floor space, a floor plate, and it's more flexible as a result of the need for the office space that potentially could make more money out of it that way.
The board may get frustrated, but if you're Mr. Butler.
Treasurer, do they know when the listing expires, the thermo listing expires with the current real estate firm?
They're going to find that out for us. That's been asked.
They're going to find that out.
Probably on the way home.
So we do not know that answer right now.
No, sir. Just a logistical question. If you're going to rent out the torso to a private group, and how, when you talk about these safety issues and security issues and elevators,
Operated and coded so they can go to certain floors. So when you get in the elevator, if you badge in and you go to a certain floor or try to go to a certain floor that you're not allowed on, it will not allow you to make that selection.
that means I'll probably never be able to attend a city council meeting.
So the city council
I'll never
meeting,
figure that out.
the city council meeting will be on the first floor.
Okay. Touche. All right. You've answered you've addressed my conflicts question.
Mr. Treasurer,
Yes, sir. Yeah, the floor.
is there an estimate on what the fee would be paid to the realtor for handling this project? And who will pay that?
We have no idea what is the arrangement between Thermo Fisher and their real estate agent. We are not paying any fees on, from the city side with regard to the acquisition of this property.
But the value of the property is grossed up by the fee. That's how sellers do it.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So it's not a line item, but it's being paid.
Yes, sir.
Somebody's getting paid to do it, and the value of the building is grossed up to pay. Mr. Butler, you have more questions?
No, but I doubt whether the value of the building is going to go down.
Has there been any attempt to negotiate that fee?
Is their deal. And the relationship with the realtor.
I just asked if there been any attempt to negotiate that fee.
Thing is,
Mr. Butler, hang on just a second, because Mr. Penny.
I don't know that they would negotiate a fee because your deal is your deal, and it is not in any way impacted by the transactions between the seller and the realtor.
That's correct.
Up or down.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Mr. Butler, you have the floor again.
He's trying to speak, but we're having some audio issues.
Okay.
We're going to bring everybody back
All right,
up. so
just
you
let
can
me know when he's there. And your answer, your
To
direct
hire the
answer.
personnel to help run the building.
I don't understand White Lake talk, so somebody can.
No, he's talking about maintenance
Treasurer,
and running.
Yes, sir, Mr. Butler. We have a plan in place to hire maintenance and operations staff related to the building, operating as the owner and landlord. We have that plan in place. And essentially, as soon as the budget is preliminarily approved and this step is completed, we'll be able to advertise those positions and have those positions in place for July 14th, the day after closing.
And does that balance and does will your receipts plus what you're now paying for expenses that you will not be paying now that you're in this other building, will they balance out? Or are you going to be, is maintenance going to cost you more?
We anticipate that it may be somewhat more expensive for the one building than it will be for the 8 that we're vacating. But it will not be as wide a difference as you might think. The big problem that we've got with the city is that we have not taken good care of our facilities to this point in time. We're making sure that we're going to treat this building with a different level of respect.
And costing you more means that even with the receipts, it's still going to cost you more.
Correct, the ongoing maintenance, what we're paying now for the maintenance in our existing buildings, which is about as good as we did for this building. The annual maintenance would be more modern technology. That's what we got.
Well, they could. We'll also have $1.8 million a year coming in as part of the thermo lease back for the next three years, potentially the next 5 years. Offset.
Thalian Hall, do you all own that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you will have more spaces to rent.
Yes, ma'am. We have yet to cross that bridge. The folks with Thalian Hall folks probably would automatically assume they're going to get that office space, but that decision's not yet been made.
Okay. Is the Register of Deeds office in there?
No, ma'am. It's actually in the old county building that's on the opposite side of the parking lot with it renovated by the county.
Will it be moving into the new county building? Register of Deeds?
No, sir. I think they're going to remain in their downtown. They spent about $10 million renovating that building.
Any more questions from the remote folks? And finally, as far as the surplus property, you're not opposed to it being subject to upset bid?
No, sir. No, sir. Our whole premise would be the best way we think we can get money out of that property.
Right. Thank you.
And your hard deadline is July 31st.
To close on the existing deal, yes, sir.
And how soft is that?
Well, we have until July or June 11th, I think it is. We have until June 11th for our current deposit not to go hard. We have until then to get it back. But at that point, we have to add an additional $300,000 to it. It becomes an $800,000 deposit that goes hard.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you all. Well done.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to come forward and explain this deal to you.
It wasn't so difficult.
So we appreciate the opportunity. Really good.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Sure.
Council. All right, you're welcome to stay as we go wind up our business.
We have a council meeting tonight.
Well, don't overstate how you were treated up here. Just say it was
We will tell them we were treated with dignity and respect.
a safe and respectful trip.
Nice job. I enjoyed your numbers. I got a lot of finance.
Thank y'all.
So just briefly, I will be following up with an email to members, but as a reminder, as the governing board for the units that the LGC has assumed control of, we'll be conducting budget hearings for Kingstown, Robertsonville, Spring Lake, and Cliffside Sanitary District. So in June, we will have a total of 6 LGC meetings. There'll be our regular meeting on June, I believe it's 6th. We'll have 2 budget hearings on Monday, June 12th. We'll have 2 budget hearings on Tuesday, June 20th. And then we'll have a final special meeting on June the 26th for those to be adopted. So I'll be following up with an email with the details, but just wanted to provide a quick update on that and alert that email will be coming your way with those details.
All right, I have an update regarding Elizabeth City. We did get their 2021 audit on April the 18th. It did disclose significant issues, and Also, keep in mind, this is June 30, 2021, so it's almost 2 years old at this point. They had low fund balance in the general fund. Water, sewer, and electric funds were good in their financial positions, but significant works needed to enforce budgetary compliance. And they also are not accounting for their capital assets or their capital projects correctly in those funds. The audit reported 13 material weaknesses, all related to internal controls and financial records. I'll run through this pretty quickly. This wasn't a finding, but their fund balance was at 13.56%, which is low for a city that size. And again, this is 2 years ago. Without PAL bill, which of course is restricted, it's only 11.84%. That's just over a month's worth of expenditures in savings. Of the 13 material weaknesses, one was they had overbilled the Coast Guard over $500,000 for water sewer and failed to record that as a payable when they discovered it. Management didn't review compensated absences. They allowed accruals of over 240 hours of vacation, which is against their policy. There were employees that were retired, 2 employees that were retired that were still in the system accruing vacation, and 22 employees that were excluded that should not have been. The beginning balance for 21 didn't tie to 2020, and that's a recurring theme. They didn't bid in compliance with the statutes for a couple of items. They don't have project ordinances for capital projects, so this is something that staff is still struggling with. They don't know how to operate with a multi-year budget or how to set that up. Obviously, the audit was almost 2 years late. The capital asset listing for the water sewer fund and the general fund also were not, they were materially out of balance with the ending balances from June 30, 2020. Water sewer fund was out over $2 million. Bank recons were 18 months in arrears and still not completed for 22 or 23. They had some issues with the way they recorded their OPEB and LEOSA expenses. So those were off almost $800,000. They also were not properly allocated across the funds based on employee salaries. Again, several times, the 2020 ending balances did not agree with the 21 beginning balances. Some of those were material, some were not. Council is not receiving regular financial reports. There are budget violations in several funds. The council meetings did not all have approved minutes on file. 19 out of 32 meetings had no approved minutes. And an additional 12 of those were prepared once the minutes were requested by the auditors. It is unclear when the 22 audit will be completed. The city manager stated at a public meeting that it would be 6 to 8 weeks from the date the 21 audit was submitted to the LGC, which was April 18th. The auditors confirmed that it is at this time impossible to know when the audit will be complete because he can't start the work until he gets the completed financial statements, notes, schedules, etc., from the city or the hired accounting firm. Greg Isley CPA's team prepared the 21 statements and is attempting to work on 22. But as of April the 27th, they have been denied access to the city's accounting records, except by requesting very specific items from the finance officer. This will slow down the progress on those financial statements tremendously.
Well, who's denied what?
The CPAs that are working under Greg Isley, the city's hired them. They no longer have access to the financial system. Finance officer and what town man? Cut them off. I think that cut them off. Cut off their access. I don't know that for sure. That's what he said. Okay. Again, this is going to slow down the progress unbelievably. They can't have access.
Is there the city given a reason why that happened? They acknowledge it happened?
They acknowledged it happened. It may have been reversed at this point because I know Mr. Isley had a conversation with the mayor on Friday. It's been somewhat of an ongoing issue. The city manager.
He's the auditor.
No, he's the
I mean,
accountant.
the reconciler.
Yes. City manager stated that the bank accounts are reconciled. This is not the case. The 22 accounts are out of balance by over $128,000. And the 2023 is, as of last week, was out of balance 1.3 million. There was a discussion at the audit presentation meeting that the city hoped it would come off the UAL since they had submitted the 2021 audit. That is not going to happen. City manager also stated that he wants to bring in a financial advisor to assist with managing the finances of the city.
That's what he's got.
The receipts are, yeah, that's what Isley's team is for.
Is there any concerns that 2 million missing, not reconciled to whatever, and now the 1.3, that cash is gone missing?
I asked Greg that, and also,
and I'm wondering about an investigation.
Beverly, I asked her about that, and they said they don't think so. They just, I mean, it's impossible to know because there's no internal controls, basically. But in working in 2021, they did not find any evidence. I don't know what they'll find in 22 and 23. That remains to be seen. But right now, they said they have no evidence of that. Again, the city manager said he wants to bring in a financial advisor. And also their response to all these findings in the office included several references to hiring more staff by July 1st. I don't think that's reasonable. I know what a hard time we're having hiring, and what I'm hearing from other people, particularly in that part of the state, is very difficult to hire.
Problem with that also is that that mindset is putting a warm body in a seat, not a qualified person.
I agree. That's where things stand as of last Friday.
So what are next steps to get them? I mean, the 2021 financial statement audit for somebody that big can't be done in 6 weeks. And particularly if the bank recs are not done and all the transactions are not posted, I mean, it'll take 6 to 8 weeks just to even get that started. So what is I mean, just let them keep going until, is their fund balance in trouble? Or we don't know?
General fund balance was low. And
do we know how good that number is?
Well, that was from 2021.
Okay. So we have no clue what it looks like now.
Well, remember they got all the ARPA money too, so that's going to boost it up.
Okay.
But they also have made several amendments over the last several months to spend more money on things. That concerns me because they don't know where they stand now financially.
Right. Right. So what happens next? Y'all take them over?
Well, I'm going to talk to Mr. Isley and see if they were able to regain access to the accounting system.
But it sounds like you might need to take them over and let Mr. Isley be the finance officer. Does that make sense? Rather than your staff doing the work, but let the LGC take them over. The town, city pay for Isley to keep going. But then all this silliness of taking away their access, giving them access, getting in his way, all that silliness would go away if you were in charge.
That's certainly an option.
Is this a staffing administrative problem? Is it a town council problem? Is it both? It's
Well, the town council, got to remember there are 9 people on the city council. 7 of them took over at the end of last year.
Wow.
So you're talking about, along with really the city manager. So you're talking about a a new city council. So this late audit was a late audit of a prior city council. The other late audit is a late audit of a prior city council. So
However, there is impediment to getting the job done.
well, I'm not sure that we've established that yet.
Okay, all right. Let's go establish that then, because I'm pretty sure that's the problem, particularly with the finance officer.
Have they responded, not to the board's letter, but to my letter?
No. The mayor keeps insisting that he sent us a letter. If he did, we did not receive it.
And he sent us a letter saying what?
I don't know.
What does he insist he sent a letter saying?
I don't know.
Oh, he just said he sent a letter. These things you read off to us, have they been sent to them?
Almost all of this came right out of the audit. And there would have been a separate letter sent to those charged with governance, which would be your city council members and your mayor, that says a lot of the same things.
Yes.
This is Cindy. Sharon, did they have their meeting yet where the auditor presented?
Yes, in fact, the last part of my report came from that.
And so when the city council meeting that I watched, when it was said that their books are reconciled and up to date, was that an accurate or inaccurate statement?
It's inaccurate. They also said in the council meeting that the bank reconciliations were up to date, right? Yes, and that's not accurate. I'm sorry, Cindy, I need to correct something. This information came from the meeting before the meeting was audited. That one was not broadcast. And who made those statements? The city manager? City manager. That the bank recs were done, yes, and the transactions posted, books are up to date. Well, in order for the bank recs to be done, the transactions would have to be posted. And both of those statements are not true. No.
So there's a lot of tension. There's a lot of tension on this board about this topic. There's a lot of tension between us and Elizabeth City. There's a lot of tension between some of the vendors and contractors to Elizabeth City who are trying to help them. And we have to irrigate this. We have to keep running water through it until we can get to what's in the best interest of the citizens on a long-term basis. And I'm willing to do that, whatever that takes among these board members, their elected officials up there, whatever it takes.
I still will go down there with you and have a conversation with whoever you want.
I've done that, and you've done that.
Have you been?
Yeah, I've talked to several people down there. And I get a slightly different take on it, but obviously there's some issues. They've done the records I have are a little different from, but not that much different from what Sharon has indicated. But
records you have from where?
But in terms of when they submitted, I have a stamped copy of when that got submitted. At like the 3rd of April is when it got submitted in. But you all may not have gotten it.
What?
The audit?
Yeah, the audit.
I mean, I don't want to say this, the date may be the opinion date on but when it gets.
I was looking at, they sent me a copy of the document when they submitted it into your
LGC.
portal.
That was 43 minutes before the board meeting.
Before your portal.
Right. I saw that. Yeah, that's not
relevant.
That's not even relevant.
But I think what is relevant is I would love to go down with you and have a conversation.
What do you think that would accomplish?
We can figure out what's going on and what's and what the steps are that they will take, and what we can do to help them.
Well, I'm just going to ask this question. What are you going to do when the city manager sits in front of you and tells you that the books are up to date and the bank recons are done?
And we can push back based on the records.
Well, I think you got a problem when he sits there and tells you a lie.
You still push back based on the records if that's what he says.
Well, that's what he said in an open meeting, in a public meeting is what he said. And it's not true. And I don't know why he would mislead his council members. And then you got somebody keeping your books. I don't know why you cut off their access. Something's wrong. That's why I'm asking about the missing money. Something's wrong. In my opinion, based on the way they operate, I think the manager was told that the books were reconciled. So now you get back to the manual. So I think it's a statute supposedly the person that cut the access to Mr. Isley cut him off. The manager's one that reported it to the board.
All right. Any other updates? Any other comments from the city or from those present or those by Zoom?
I mean, I want to just say this is so you're coming up on 2023. We don't have 2022 audit. So you have no idea what their financial, I guess the concern is that we're going to wait so long that they're going to be in poor financial shape and it's going to take so much to get them back. And then you got all this ARPA money. You can't just be, that's not recurring. That's not going to come back again. You need to use every dime of it to fix the things that need to be fixed with ARPA money. So again, I just worry about waiting is my point, to let them get further deeper into this black hole.
That may be a good reason for us to go down and figure out when they're going to get us that audit.
Why can't we do that by Zoom?
Some things should
More effective.
some things.
Yeah, more time.
It'll give you and I a chance to talk to.
We can talk in Raleigh.
That's all I'm saying. I just worry about letting it continue, let it drag out.
Yeah.
Not if you're on the motorcycle.
Mr. Treasurer,
Somebody has something online, go ahead.
Mr. Treasurer, this is Mike Philbeck. This, for what it's worth, I'm in my 10th year, I guess, on this LGC. I'll have to say, I know you know, and others know a lot more than I do about the total situation. I don't know that I've ever seen any better presentation than Wilmington did today for their cause, for what it's worth.
Thank you. As far as Elizabeth City is concerned, did you say in your findings something about a Coast Guard?
They overbilled the Coast Guard $500,000 in utility billings, and
That
they didn't record it as a payable. They owed that money back to the
is the Coast Guard wanting, is the Coast Guard asking for it back?
Oh, they're paying it back. They may have already paid it back. They just didn't record it in the financial records that they owed it.
So, and it's been reported in the paper that they're going to be buying the Coast Guard station.
They want to.
And do we have any way of knowing whether that they've done that or not? I mean, really?
I mean, members of my staff listen to all the board meetings that are broadcast. They plan to borrow money for that?
I don't think they're buying a Coast Guard station.
Yeah, I mean, they want to, but yeah, I do think that we'd have to borrow money, and they know. Don't count on them.
Yeah, I'm not, it's the thought that my concern and is that there's just two different complete realities here about where they are, where
you think they are, where Greg thinks they are, where their auditor thinks they are, the citizens think they are, and it can't, the truth cannot be that. It's just what it is.
Well, I'm going to say though, until you get their books straight, you don't know the truth. Until you get their books straight, you don't know the truth. You don't know if there's money missing. You don't know if it's just bad accounting. You don't know who's responsible for the problems. There's just so much we don't know.
Anything else from the remote folks?
Mr. Treasurer,
Isn't it time for your siesta?
No, because you
soon. Treasurer, can I suggest you give consideration is there a way we could mount a camera behind you so when presentations are being made, we could see the people making the presentations and hear them better? I mean, you know, all we're seeing is just the back of their neck at best. And I know there are 6 of us up here. Well, 5 of us up virtually today. And I don't know how difficult that'd be to make happen, but I think it would greatly enhance our virtual meetings if we could mount a camera somewhere behind you or to the corners where we could see the people make a presentation to you and the Council of State members and Secretary Perry that are up front. And as Mr. Philbeck said, just a bit of the order.
Does that camera work?
Yes, it does.
Then why can't we put the presenters along this row and then just run?
And just so you know, Mr. Tripp, the presentation was, they could see it fully on their screen. So although they might not have been able to see the people, they had a full screen view of what we were all seeing.
But having been at home, there's a difference in seeing the PowerPoint and seeing the people.
And that camera does work. We can take it.
If that camera works, then without spending money, you can just put them here and move us over there.
Mr. Butler, can you hear us?
I can hear.
Good. Okay.
Well,
I'm reminded of when Amazon only had 2 employees, Jeff Bezos and a guy who was helping pack books with used books, boxes. And they were on their knees, they were packing books, and Jeff handed this guy some money and said, go out and buy some knee pads. Our knees are getting hurt, are sore. And the person looks at him and says, can I just go buy a table?
Yeah, well, go buy a camera and get it mounted where we can see the presenters.
My point is, while you're having your siesta, we'll consider how we can possibly reconfigure the room so that we can accomplish your goal.
Well, ask the other members. Ask John and Ms. Hoffman. I mean, to me, it'd be much more informative if we could see the presenters.
I agree. I'm saying we can possibly reconfigure the room with the cameras we already have, very possibly. People really don't need to see me. All right.
I think you won.
I second that. Oh, wait, sorry.
John seconds that people really don't need to see.
John, are you seconding my proposal?
I'm seconding not needing to see the treasurer.
I was told this morning I have a face so that's here all day today. So, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Wow. Now, clerk, call the roll.
Gunning.
I'm a little ambivalent about that. But I just wanted to see Secretary Marshall's face.
You got the stink eye. Way down there.
Justin, I'll have to watch that on camera. Mr. Burns.
Aye.
Okay, Mr. Butler.
Ah.
Thank you. Ms. Harvey, are you still there?
I am. Aye.
Thank you. And Councilwoman Hoffman, I saw her in the kitchen. There she is.
And I'm on my way downtown to a council meeting. So yes, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And Mr. Philbeck and Treasurer. All
Secretary of Penny's been sneezing, so everybody needs to go wash your hands.
And
Mine is allergies.
We're
I did it. I did it first.